Okay. So good evening, everybody. My name is Peter Poku. I'm the chair of the Standards Committee, and welcome to the meeting of the Standards Committee. So please note that this meeting is being streamed live, also recorded by the council for a subsequent broadcast by the council's internet site. So I'll begin by asking members to introduce themselves and confirm their attendance. I'll start with Councillor Blake.
Councillor Barbara Blake, I'm here.
Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, Councillor Carroll Howe here.
And Councillor Dogan.
Yep, Councillor Adele Dogan, Seven Sisters.
Thank you. And then also present are the following officers. So if you could also introduce yourself, so it's Fiona Alderman.
I'm Fiona Alderman, I'm the council's monitoring officer.
And Aisha Simsek.
I'm Aisha Simsek, I'm the Democratic Services and Scrutiny Manager.
All right, thank you. So we now move on to item 2, which is apologies for absence. Do you have any apologies for absence?
Chair, we do. We've got apologies for absence from Councillor Okioho.
Okay, thank you. And then to item 3, which is items for urgent business. Do we have any items for urgent business?
No items of urgent business.
And then we're now on to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest for this evening? Perfect. No declarations of interest. So we're now on to item 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting that took place on the 29th of June. Can I just check first if members are happy for accuracy of the minutes?
Yeah.
Yes. And are there any matters arising from the minutes? No? Okay, so we can take this as an accurate record. We also have the minutes of the assessment subcommittee meeting that was held on the 26th of July, but that's part of the exempt part of the meeting, so we'll go through that during the exempt part of the meeting, but just note that we have those minutes as well.
Chair, these are the public version that we also published, so it just sets out what was when we opened the meeting in the public part of it.
Okay. So then in that case, I will then move on to agenda item 6 then, which is the briefing paper on declarations of interest and personal safety for councillors. So I'm not sure, is this being led by yourself? I'm sure that you, Fiona, who's leading on there.
It's both of us. I mean, I can just start and just kind of set out what we put in the report, just very briefly. So this report is just taking forward the discussion and previous concerns that you've had as a committee about the declaration of home addresses on members of interest form. I think there's been a long-standing concern about the safety implications of keeping the addresses of councillors on the website and available to the public. The report just really sets out the reasons for the need to put addresses on declaration of interest forms, just the history around that, and how the kind of model code of conduct that we use, and also includes the inclusion of any land and property on declarations of interest. So it just starts off by just going through the background of that. There is the provision that was provided in the Localism Act to deal with withholding an interest from the register, and this deals with a sensitive interest, and that is just designed to cover, situations where the nature of an interest is where disclosure of the details would lead to the member or the co-opted member connected to be subject to violence and intimidation. So that would be the only reason to put forward in terms of withholding the address from the declaration of interest form. I mean, over the years, I think, and there has been there's been a sympathetic stance from the monitoring officers here that we've had in terms of putting forward issues where those details should be withheld, and I think there's quite a few councillors that have had their addresses withheld, and the reasons provided to the monitoring officer at the meeting. I mean, I've looked into just to see if there's been an update. I think we last discussed this maybe a year and a half ago, and I'm pretty sure there isn't any kind of changes being put forward to legislation to kind of remove the requirement for councillors to put their addresses on the register of interest. I think there's been something recently in terms of the requirement for candidates when they're going for election to have their home addresses not published on the ballot paper. That's been taken forward, but so far there isn't anything of a similar nature for councillors. Had a look through the LGA guidance, and they published something quite recently in June, July this year about handling intimidation. So there is an awareness, I think, of councillors, of MPs being subject to intimidation. So they published some guidance which I've attached to the report, which kind of, you know, it gives a bit of some more kind of good practice guidance about how to keep safe. I don't know if that's going to meet your kind of requirements, but I've put it in the pack so that you can have a look, and it's something you feel we need to address. I mean, it's something we're going to be looking at again in the member training programme going forward, but that's the position at the moment.
Well, thank you for this. Did you want to add anything, Fiona, or?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair, can you ask a question? Yeah, can I? Yeah, so just to clarify, so in 2018, council addresses was on the ballot paper.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the next election, which is May 2022, the council's address will not be on the ballot paper?
As far as I'm aware.
And the candidates will not be on the ballot paper.
The address.
Correct.
Okay. Because that ballot paper
Yeah.
is thousands of people can see your address, and sometimes it can be an issue.
The ballot papers would have the addresses on it. So, however, when whoever's been elected, when they are elected, then we still have to put our addresses as part of the declaration of interest.
Yeah, so within 28 days, you would have to complete a declaration of interest form that would include
Sure.
putting your address. Yeah.
So I know this is something that, you know, I think the committee, like you said, Aisha, the committee has asked before. And what I did do, we haven't had enough time to bring it to this meeting itself. But I did think that it would be useful to find out what the other boroughs are doing, because there are some boroughs where they aren't disclosing the councillors' addresses on the declaration of interest form. So it'll be interesting to see what's happened there. And also in addition, I did send as well some recent cases that's happened to councillors where their cars have been torched. I think even something more local to us, where they've had stones thrown into their homes or their cars and things. So and to me, it's not good enough to wait after the fact. You don't want to have something happen and then now say that, oh, let's remove the address, because the issue has already arisen. So that's where my concerns come. But Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, no, I think you make some good points there. So in terms of the other councils, you're right, the other councils do it slightly differently, which is something that the previous monitoring officer was questioned about, and just restate the position. I haven't looked into what it is. Ms. Alderman can probably tell me more about the kind of options of how they would do it. But there are councils I know of that there is no councillor on there with their thing on there. Now, whether that's because there's been a general threat at some stage, that they've made it a kind of blanket thing because there was a specific general threat, I would suggest that's probably the case. Or you know, individually the 50 odd councillors may have had their own reasons, but I think that's probably less likely. So that's probably why. But that you're right that there are some that don't as a rule. But I would have thought that the monitoring officer would have wanted some kind of reason for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that. And then, but I mean, I kind of feel mixed about this because I take on board what you're saying, and I think it was a worthwhile thing to ask for this and actually to see the councillor's guide on handling intimidation, which I did have a look at. Mostly it's kind of common sense stuff, but very useful to know that it is there should councillors kind of need it and stuff like that. But I think it's something of a red herring. I think the address on the website, because. And you mentioned something closer to home, which I know about. I mean, there's two others in our group that I know about. I mean, there is 0% chance that was a member of the public finding it on the.
Sorry, I missed that bit. So
No. So the chair mentioned something that we're aware of that happened in this borough.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, we're all aware of that, and there's at least two others in our group that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And there's 0% chance that was a random member of the public who looked at that online. It's far more likely to be closer to home. I would suggest probably other members in the group. So I think this kind of idea of the address being on the website, opening you up to kind of a big threat and taking it off, kind of solving a big threat. I think it's a slight red herring. Because I think the major threat in local government is not random members of the public. It's probably our colleagues actually. Also, in terms of the introduction from Ms. Simchek, I think it's really useful that you stated that there has been a sympathetic view given by the monitoring officer in terms of requests for withholding, because that's something that maybe didn't come through too much in the report. And actually, in my experience and the experience of others that I've spoken to, the barrier actually for that is not that high. So councillors should be reminded that you don't have to prove some kind of imminent threat or something like that to get the to have that withdrawn. The barrier is not that high, and so if maybe we can, whenever we kind of take that advice, and we can remind councillors that it doesn't have to be a specific knowable imminent threat. It can be something less than that, and you will you won't try and fight that, if you see what I mean.
No, Chair, if it's helpful, no, I'm pretty sympathetic.
Yeah.
So, if somebody was, lead member for children, for example, and you've got a very contentious case related to that, then I'm not going to wait until something happens. If the member has concerns, that's just reasonable. I think it's more difficult to do a blanket approach because it's hard to explain how you exercise dual discretion if it's a blanket approach. And sometimes members actually do want to retain their address as well. And that's got to be respected because it's important for them to show their local connection.
Yeah.
So I think it's to be dealt with on a case by case basis. But I am very sympathetic and I do understand it.
And I think the instruction is right that has been long-standing with previous monitoring officer also, in my experience, took that view.
Yeah, Chair, it's not a forensic approach to a criminal standard. It's just not.
I think it's really helpful.
Okay.
Chair, if it's helpful, we could send out the advice and a reminder via the members' news. And just to make sure that we hit on all members with.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought that it's a useful discussion to have, especially after going through to a new election, and the fact that candidates' addresses will not be on the ballot paper. I thought it's quite, be quite good to have the same going forward. And we're not saying that we would have addresses full stop. It's just that we don't make that public unless there's some kind of request that's made that it is shared, but it's just not.
Chair, the final point I'd make is just reminding members that your address might be public available through another means. So if you do have serious concerns about your security, then 192.com, whether you're on the open register, whether you've got a company that's registered your home address, so it's not sort of panacea for everything.
Yeah, open register, very important.
So can I just ask, out of interest, I'm not sure whether you know this answer or not, but I think just generally with the members of parliament, their addresses are not generally displayed, but it might be a different act. I know we're under the Localism Act, maybe that's the reason why we have these rules for us, but it would be Just wondering how that works for them.
I know, Chair, that they do have a register of interest. I haven't looked at it for a long time, so I can remember if their addresses are on or not.
I don't think it's on the website, no.
Yeah.
From memory, I think when we looked at it previously, I think this was, yeah, it wasn't a requirement.
It doesn't
I've seen it. I have seen it on, and then I've seen it also say addresses in such and such constituency. You know, so that's it gives a broad area, but it doesn't give the whole thing on the ballot paper. That's that I've seen. I remember seeing that. So I think that must be that way.
So sorry, are there any other questions related to this?
No, well, only just to say, Chair, that I've got slightly mixed feelings about it, because I do think that concept of councillors being local and being known to residents, and, you know, I have never ever felt unsafe with residents, not in the same way that I have in other forums. So I absolutely agree with what you say, Vincent, you know, and I think I've never felt unsafe with residents. I mean, of course, I use my common sense. Do you know what I mean? And if I'm going somewhere, I make sure that if someone, you know, I'm visiting a resident, they know, someone knows where I am and that kind of thing, roughly how long I'm going to be. And if I do go to a resident's house, I'm, you know, very clear. I treat the house with utmost respect. You know, I don't go in unless I'm invited. I don't sit down unless I'm asked to sit down. All of that. So I've got slightly mixed feelings about it. You know, at some stage, the areas where I've been intimidated and in tears and felt unsafe has got to be addressed, but perhaps not by this committee. But, you know, you can't get away from it.
No, indeed. No, indeed.
And
I
think it applies
to
to
many councils.
yeah, many councils.
This won't solve that.
Yeah,
No,
it's-
this won't solve that.
Okay, so can I just ask then, do councillors still want us to, well, the committee to actually just get information about the other local authorities and what they do? And then, or are they happy just to leave it with the guidance that we've got right now and the fact that, you know, the monitoring officer will look at cases with a sympathetic ear?
I don't think it needs to be that formal that the monitoring officer needs to kind of do a report on other councils or something, but just out of interest, it would be, because I don't think this is going to go any further, because I think it is a matter of discretion. There will be a reason for those other councils. It would be interesting to know, because I know a couple of councils. I can tell you offline, a couple of councils that do it, but there must be a reason, and I would be interested to know what that reason is. But I think that's a matter of a kind of couple line email rather than a report.
So you think, okay, so you don't think we need to bring anything to the next meeting just for noting? Because I mean, this is also just to note. It's not we're not making any decisions on this. It's more to note. So you don't think it's worthwhile doing anything for the next meeting? It's more of just a follow-up email saying these are the local authorities that, yeah, and the reason why they are not.
Yeah, because I think the legal position is set out quite clear. I mean, anyone could be running the role at any stage. Not, you know, I don't think you are, obviously. In fact, no, you're not. But the legal position set out is quite clear. So I would kind of question where we would be going with another kind of how can we take this any further as a committee, given that the legal position is quite clear.
Okay, so rather than a paper that comes to the next meeting, it's more of just an email that just gets circulated to members of the committee.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering about the amount of effort that would happen. Is that okay with yourself?
That's fine.
Just
I can send a quick note round to add, so colleagues and just.
I'll tell you a couple councils where I think it happens, and you can drop a line to their monitoring officer, and that's probably 5 minutes work.
Okay. So that's,
Famous last words.
Yeah. Give me a runaround.
okay, so then that's fine. So if there isn't anything else on this item, then we can then move on to the next item, which is item 7. And that's the recent development on ethical standards. And we're meant to have Stephen Lawrence, but I don't think he is here today.
Stephen's been called abroad on family bereavement, so but I can try my best to cover Stephen's report. This is the report, Chair, that I asked Stephen to pull together because I thought it would be helpful just for the committee to be kept abreast of national developments and just to give the committee a sense outside, any formal training opportunities in the area, just, what are the sort of national cases on standards, what can we learn from it, learn from those cases, and just to keep you abreast of sort of national developments in the ethical standards world. So it's a noting report, Chair, and I'm sort of happy to do my best to answer any individual queries that you might have on any of the cases. Maybe it's relatively self-explanatory. So what we're going to try and do, Chair, is bring this periodically to the meeting throughout the municipal year, if you find it helpful.
I think it's definitely interesting to see the types of cases that have been heard or these types of issues. I think it's definitely something that's just interesting to know. So I'll just pass it around, and are there any questions from anybody?
No. Okay. I read the case was interesting. So.
I enjoyed reading it.
I like the word enjoy.
Really useful in terms of see why the case that emerges from these authorities. Yeah. Buying shares, selling shares.
and the planning
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
I mean, I'd just like to say, Chair, I think when I was reading through these, sometimes, I don't know, and I'm there's that fine line, isn't there, that I think, or people, you don't think about something, it's a fine line, and I guess it is always about getting advice,
Yeah.
and I think that's got to, if there's anything that comes out of that, it's to encourage councils that there's no such a thing as asking a daft question, is there? In the sense of saying, I don't know, I'm thinking of buying a piece of land and whatever, I'll sit on the planning committee. I'm going to buy shares, and but I think, because it does seem to me that if people had sought advice in the first place, their reputations wouldn't have been damaged in the way they were.
And you're absolutely right, Councillor, and it's nothing worse as monitoring officer when you're sitting in an actual meeting and somebody's trying to explain a company structure to you and work out whether their shareholding is, and at that point you're kind of like, I think it's best probably you step out, so you can't, and it doesn't look great in the meeting.
Yeah.
So, I'd always encourage people to get, advice in advance.
Yes.
So I can help you best.
Yes.
If there was ever the question of the criminal prosecution, which is obviously very rare, then the police would look at whether, the sort of advice has been taken in advance.
Any other comments? And are we happy to have from time to time these kind of reports coming back to us?
Yeah.
It's really useful.
Yeah, very useful.
Yeah.
See.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for thinking about that type of thing to add to the papers. So then we'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is the committee work program. I'll just pass that on to you, Aisha.
Chair, this is the members' comments. It's got the kind of key items that are coming up for the next couple of meetings. So it's just reminding members, I think when we appointed the independent persons onto the committee, we did it for a 2-year only process, not a 4-year, so that will be coming to an that's due to expire 30th of June of 2022. And I think that was following consideration of the report on standards in public life. So we're going to need to, I don't know what your feelings are, we're going to need to kind of look at it, either extending that appointment or taking forward a new appointment. If it's just bringing back a paper, I think, just to set out the options on that for the 25th of January. And then members' allowances scheme, that will be the first draft that will come to you. I think the LGA, they haven't updated their report for about 3 years. I think they've been seeking some information from Democratic Services managers about their payments to members at the moment. So I think they're going to probably have a report as well in probably early January. So I've added that in. That'll be a good chance to have a look at what recommendations they've got on allowances for councillors in London. I don't know what the appetite will be. I mean, they've asked us all as Democrats, I think, to respond by, I think, the end of this month with that information, just to get a sense of how much work councillors are doing and what the appetite is in terms of payments. But I think that will be a decision, again, that you may want to have a kind of look at early in January, and then again in late February before council in March. And then, for the 28th of February, that's quite a bit earlier because we've got the pre-election period coming up. So council was a bit earlier, so then you've got the meeting a month later. Again, I've just flagged up if there are any potential constitutional changes, that could be a meeting where you can look at that. And we've got, I think it was agreed, I think last year in March, for you to have an annual update on complaints. So that's coming forward in February. And then again, it'll be the final report on members' allowances and the independent person appointments if you're wanting to take something, or we would need to take something forward in the March council.
Okay. And also, actually, we did discuss this, and I've also just moved Fiona about this as well. If there's anything that you think we might want to add or update the code of conduct for councils on as well, if we want to, we can bring that to the January committee, because obviously if it's going to be a new administration, there may be some things that we might want to add. I know social media policy will be one thing that we'll be adding to it, or other things that are missing from the existing code of conduct that we might want to add as well to it. And then anything that we can think of as members training that as a committee we may want to suggest, recommend for the new intake of councillors. But that might be something that we can be looking at in the January committee.
So are you suggesting that they should be like some sort of training for the new members after they're elected?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
It'll be new. It should be all councillors, because we all need to have a refresher anyway.
But I'm saying that.
We normally do an intensive program, like usually when we have new councillors every 4 years.
Did I attend?
Just all merged in.
I might have, I don't know, but that's a brilliant idea. Because I remember after election also does, anyway.
Yeah, I remember, it was quite,
we do like a couple of sessions. There is like usually the kind of the key things like code of conduct and how the council works and the key parts of the constitution, have the planning training, licensing training.
Yes.
And then get also the training.
I'm just talking about standards.
Oh, there's a specific one for
we have standards. Remember, you were sat in, we have standards, and then when you joined the committee itself, we had the meeting where you had, before the actual committee meeting, you sat with Raymond and he went through something. So you have had the standards.
But I think it would be good to have some of these cases in that standard committee so people can actually understand.
Yeah, I was going to suggest actually, perhaps we can sort of take some soundings as how to make it a bit more interactive.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot we can do with technology now. People can
Some
vote to what they think
really
the answer
beneficial.
is. They can add text on Slido or something like that, just so we can sort of make it as interactive as possible.
So maybe rather than having long text, maybe some sort of like animation kind of, like a video perhaps, that could be really
Are you
easy to
volunteering?
digest.
I'll tell Raymond, yeah.
to digest the information. I think this is what this council, this is what has happened, some sort of like a,
It's important to think about how best it lands, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sort of death by PowerPoint can be.
Yeah, because when you first get elected and then there's so many things to be thinking about. You go to a lot of meetings and there's so much information to take in that you're not always able to digest it. So if we can have things that are a bit more bite-sized, it might be that even we have the main code of conduct training at the beginning, but maybe also have something else later on during,
Substitute.
like every year or something, like an annual review, because things could have updated as well. Those types of things that might be quite useful. Okay, so if we can add that to the work program for January, then we can look at that as well.
I'm sure everyone will come up with some sort of plan.
And yes, are we happy with the work program? Is there anything else that people think they want to add or things that we might want to consider?
Well, for me, it looks fine.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of what else it would be. I mean, do you think there's anything else, Chair, that should go on it?
No, I think that's those are the main things, because normally in January, we always look at the members' allowance scheme. And then with the appointment of independent member, it's more of we want to, we as a committee to extend it, or do we want to go through to recruitment? We would have to be looking at. I know that they have to, there's a certain number of years, like the term that they would normally serve anyway, that maybe you might not want to renew it because they've been here for X number of time. But again, it's the committee's decision what they want to do. If we go into recruitment, we have to actually plan it because of the fact that we're now going into the local elections. So you have to have completed this by a certain date for it to stand. So we have to also consider all of those things as well. But that's for us to look at in January anyway.
Okay.
Chair, sort of other topics which are sort of perhaps of a broader sort of compliance interest. Say, for example, I don't know whether members here have done training in, for example, the Bribery Act, or something of that nature. That there might be sort of important information that we just reinforce with councillors.
That's really helpful.
Give some hospitality issues like that, because then we could bring it here and then circulate it more widely.
That'll be interesting as well.
So, Chair, in relation to independent members' appointments, could you just speak, is this the person who looks at the cases?
The complaints,
Okay,
right.
fair enough. I thought it was for the committee.
No,
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that question. I was wondering.
Because I wasn't really sure.
no, it's for the complaint.
Okay.
That's just a subcommittee meetings. Okay. So if there isn't anything else to add to the committee work program, then I'll move on to item 9, which is new items of urgent business, and we haven't had any. So I'm going to then move on to item 10, which is exclusion of the press and public. So we will now be considering item 11, which contains exempt information. We will now be moving to exclude the press and public from the remainder of the meeting and consider this exempt information as defined under paragraphs 1 to 2, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and it's namely information relating to any individual and information likely to reveal the identity of an individual. If anyone has any comments or objections to this, please speak now. Any objections in the public? No. Okay, so this has been agreed. So thank you, and that marks the end of the